Hello and welcome to episode 4 of the Freediving Podcast, your source for information about training for freediving, not only so you can freedive better, but so you can live the most healthy and epic life possible. I am your host, Renee Blundon. I'm a competitive freediver and a freediving instructor trainer living in Dahab, and this podcast represents the efforts of my own personal research and my trial and error from my freediving training, as well as the combined efforts of a public open source information network, which I invite you to join on Facebook at facebook.com/groups/freediving podcast. All are welcome. And feel free to check out the podcast page on my website at reneeblundon.com/podcast. There you can also sign up for my new Friday 5 newsletter, which is my roundup of 5 facts, fun, and F-ups of the week. I try to include information that's interesting and inspiring and freediving related, so I think you'll like it. And any information or questions can be sent to me at info@reneeblundon.com. And thank you all for listening. So in the last episode, I spoke about some of the different mental techniques which top freedivers use to perform more optimally on their dives. There are all sorts of mental strategies and techniques that can be applied to your freediving training and your lifestyle, which not only help you perform more optimally on your dives, but also help you deal with the stress and the anxiety associated with freediving, and to help you deal with any setbacks along the way so that you can bounce back more quickly from any failed dive attempts. I also started to unpack some of the mental strategies that top freedivers use. So if we were to try and look inside of the mind of a successful freediving athlete, what are the different factors that can be linked to success in freediving? And these are motivation and goal setting, confidence, experience and knowledge, using routines and getting in the right frame of mind, and good at handling pressure and anxiety. So today I'm going to talk in more detail about the first one, motivation and goal setting. And because it's such a big topic, I'm actually going to continue talking about it on the next episode as well. And then after that will be an episode about building confidence for freediving and techniques for that. And then there'll be an episode on experience and knowledge and so on and so forth. I'm just going to go right down the list. So, motivation. I'm going to start here just by reading you an excerpt from William Trubridge's blog. He wrote, and this is in regards to his mental training for his 102-meter CNF dive. He wrote, "I knew that for this record attempt, I was going to need my full A game. All the elements of me, body, mind, undermind, subconscious, and spirit, the diver or inner fire that pushes me on, would have to function at their highest level. So in my mental preparation, I regularly checked in with each in turn, addressing it like a person, and letting it know I would need all of its resources. As I often tell students in vertical blue courses, you can't muscle your way to the bottom plate and back any more than you can get there with meditation alone. Both vehicles need to be firing on all cylinders and fueled by an unshakable motivation." So feel free to read more on William's blog at williamtrubridge.com. So motivation is clearly very important in freediving. And it's really the foundation of all athletic effort and athletic accomplishment, because without a desire and a strong determination to improve in freediving, all of the other mental factors like confidence, focus, routines, experience, stress management, all of them are almost pointless if you don't have motivation. For example, you can have all the confidence in the world, but if you're not motivated and if you're a bit lazy, sorry, just saying how it is, then you won't have that drive in you, that fire to show up every day or almost every day to train, to eat healthy foods, to do stretching, etc., etc. So you're probably not going to be an incredibly successful freediver. So point is that if you want to become the absolute best freediver that you can be, you must be motivated to train consistently and to do what it takes to maximize your abilities in freediving. So, what is motivation? Motivation, just to put it simply, is the ability to initiate and persist at a particular task. So, in order to perform your best in freediving, you have to want to start the process of developing yourself as a freediving athlete and then maintain your efforts all the way until you've achieved your goals. Motivation's so important in freediving because it will directly impact the level of success that you ultimately achieve. If you're highly motivated to improve your freediving performance, then you'll put in the time and the effort necessary, and you'll be willing to train and to work hard even when it's super difficult, even when the conditions aren't really good, when you have thermoclines, when you have waves or cold water. Something Alexei Molchanov said in an interview was, and I quote, "The secret is that I trained for this for many years. Freediving is a matter of adaptation, and you can't go with big steps. I actually like the colder water below the thermocline because you just need to be more focused. You can't just relax. You need to make an effort to relax. After 20 to 30 meters when the free fall starts, when I make no move and sink, I make an effort to check my body to be sure I have no tension. I think it makes my focus even better. I need to test my psychological strength to challenge my limits on the next competitions. But I will only do it with small steps. My next target is 131 meters. It's not only about breath holding, but also about oxygen narcosis or pressure." And this was on worldadventuredivers.com. So also take Matt Molina, for example, who I think has 2 world records in the pool. He said, and I quote, "I train mostly every day. My training is complex, so I do everything. I do pool training, I do strength training, I do hypoxic training. I work with the psychologist and I work on my diet and nutrition. There are many parts to my training. As for the training plan, I very often do what my gut tells me. I never write down a plan for the month and stick to it. I do assign some days to certain types of exercises. For example, on Monday, I do the pool, and on Tuesday, I do the physical training. So I have this kind of plan, but I don't have any specific numbers." So my point here is that freediving training takes time, and it's not always easy. Even if you love freediving, the training can often be super challenging. And so you have to find ways to get through those challenges of like Alexei diving in cold water, also adapting to pressure, adapting your body to low O2, high CO2. Maybe also you're just tired. Maybe you're dehydrated. Maybe you don't feel like freediving that day and you'd rather do something else. The love of freediving alone isn't enough to make you want to keep going through all these tough times and through all these difficulties. But that willingness to continue to train and still give it a 100% effort, that's all about motivation. So motivation's also super important because it impacts everything else that influences your freediving performance. It influences your breath hold times, your physical training, your technique, your mental preparation, even your lifestyle, your sleep, your diet, your relationships with people, really everything. I know at moments whenever I'm unmotivated or going into kind of overtraining mode, for sure, I'm not able to hold my breath as long. I'll be like more likely to snack on foods which I know aren't healthy, then I don't sleep well. It's basically all linked together. And without a doubt, my freediving performance suffers. Then another example of why motivation is important in freediving is maybe you're competing against another freediver for a particular record or to win a competition. So you're like kind of head to head with someone. And let's say you and the other freediver are completely equal in your abilities. So rather than the abilities determining what the outcome is, the one who succeeds in the end is going to be the one who worked the hardest, who never gives up, and who performs his or her best when it counts. In other words, the freediver who's more motivated will be the one who succeeds. So now let's talk about signs of low motivation. If a freediver has low motivation, and we touched on this a little bit already, then the person won't have a desire to train as much as they should. They'll give less than 100% effort in their training. They'll skip trainings or shorten their trainings. And the person might make unhealthy choices in their lifestyle, not eating the right foods, staying up late, things like that. And keep in mind, an unmotivated person probably won't be that much fun to be around or even very helpful to go freediving with. I dived with a lot of different people over the years, and I can say that my favorite people to freedive with are people who are positive, who are motivated, and who, like me, seek success in their life and in their freediving. I read an interesting study recently in Gary Keller's book, The One Thing, about 500 school kids who had best friend relationships. And the children who were BFFs with high achieving students experienced gains in their report cards. So just by hanging out with people who seek success, who are high performers, this can subconsciously strengthen your motivation and can also positively push your performance. And keep in mind, I'm sure it works the other way too. So if you're hanging out with really unmotivated people, that's going to, without a doubt, affect your performance in a negative way. A quote from Gary Keller's book, "No one succeeds alone and no one fails alone. Pay attention to the people around you. Seek out those who will support your goals and show the door to anyone who won't." So the people in your life influence you and impact you probably more than you can even imagine. So make sure that the sway they have you on sends you in the direction that you want to go. Okay, so we know that motivation is crucial, but where does motivation come from? Well, this question sits in the same category as the question, what makes people happy? If we all knew the answer, we'd all be happy and motivated right away. Personally, I feel that motivation to train consistently in freediving, day in and day out, is the result of quite a few different things. So next, I'll go over some of these various and effective approaches, sharing some specific examples from top freedivers around the world. And then, towards the end of the next podcast episode, I'll answer the question about what helps me stay motivated, since I get this question quite a lot. So how does a freediver become motivated? Well, one of the best ways to get motivated is to set goals. Goals are really what defines a freediving athlete, because the goals that you set will determine just how much drive you have and how much will you have in order to perform well in freediving. In Umberto Pellizzari's book, Specific Training for Freediving, Patrick Muzimu, not sure if I'm pronouncing his last name right. He was the first man to dive to 200 meters in variable weight. It's written that, quote, for Patrick, it was essential to know exactly what the goal was, discipline, date, location, in order to better plan his preparation, his approach, the depth increase, the loading and unloading of the training exercises, both in his dry preparation and for when he was at sea. He left absolutely nothing to chance. He was very meticulous and precise. In the same book, Goran Kolak said, quote, with my trainer, I decide what will be the most important event of the year, and I start to plan the entire training schedule around that goal. In some seasons, however, there are two primary events. In this case, everything becomes more difficult. I try to determine which competition is the most important, and through precise choices and workouts, try to be as fit as possible, giving priority to my ultimate goal. Also, Guillaume Neri, he mentioned goals in his interview in the same book. Quote, I planned my workout over a period of at least 8 months. I had general guidelines that I followed in my training process when I was getting closer to the most important goal of the season. So let us say that I knew where I had to go, but the choice of the table and the workouts, exercise, load, etc., could change a few days before the training session. And the book is full of lots of other interviews with Alexei Molchanov, Herbert Nish, Branko Petrovic, William Trubridge, Alessia Zucchini, and Andrea Zuccari, and every single freediving champion in there mentions something in one form or another about setting a goal or setting a target and working towards it. So I think one of the most important things for your freediving and for your motivation are the goals that you set for yourself, because you need to know where you want to go. You don't want to be like Alice in Wonderland. Remember where she says to the cat, would you tell me which way I ought to go from here? And the cat's like, that depends a good deal on where you want to go. And then Alice says, I don't much care where. And then the cat says, then it doesn't matter which way you go. This goes to show that if you don't know where you want to go, if you don't have a goal or an objective, then A, you may never get there, and B, how do you know what you should do right now, in this moment today? If you have even just some kind of goal, then at least you know where you're headed, and then you're going somewhere on purpose, and then there will always be something that you can do every day to help get you to where you want to go. A quote I like by Alan Lakin is, quote, planning is bringing the future into the present so that you can do something about it now. So let's say you have your goal. Maybe your goal is to freedive to a particular depth, or to participate in a particular competition coming up, or setting a record of some sort. Whatever your goal is, setting just one main goal, this alone isn't always enough when it comes to goal planning and such, because it's also important that a freediver has a number of sub-goals that are related to their performance and their main goal. So things like personal bests, dive time or breath hold goals, goals in technique like equalization or just moving more efficiently in the water, relaxation goals, etc., etc. So to give you an example, let's just say your main goal is to freedive to 100 meters. Your sub-goals for that could be have a static apnea breath hold of 6 minutes or more. Be able to do a dynamic in the pool of at least 250 meters. And then the third one could be able to do an FRC dive with mouth fill to 50 meters. I don't know, I'm just making this up, but the point is, whatever your sub-goals are, those are going to help drive you and motivate you both in training and in competition. And so that's why it's important that your main goal and your sub-goals conform to certain features, which scientists and psychologists always refer to the SMARTER acronym, S standing for specific. Make sure your goal is specific enough. Not, I want to free dive as deep as I can go, but I want to free dive to 50 meters. M standing for measurable. How will you measure your progress? What milestones will you have? So if your goal is to dive to 50 meters, maybe your milestones would be in depth, first 30 meters and 35, 40, so on and so forth. A standing for ambitious. Your goals in freediving should be ambitious, yet attainable. So, for example, something Miguel Lozano said in an interview, quote, okay, someone with a lack of adaptation, he goes 2 weeks to Dahab and has a squeeze, but keeps going because he wants the national record, which is nothing other than a bit of ego for ourselves, because he doesn't need the record. He works in computers or something. I've seen people damage themselves for national record, like crazy enough to give up the sport. And I say, why? It's incredible. You push until you don't like the sport anymore. You F yourself, your hobby, something that you love. You F yourself in your hobby just for this. So that would be an example of freedivers coming to Dahab for 2 weeks with a goal that's not attainable. Instead, if we look at David Mullins, for example, he said in an interview on oceanhunter.com, quote, when looking ahead, it pays not to put too much value on the limits others appear to be running up against, as there's still so much scope for development and innovation. This applies to everybody, not just me. Although it seems fanciful now, I think that 300 meters DYN is an achievable goal. Whether I'll be able to do it or not is anybody's guess, but I'm comfortable with setting that as a target. So his goal is indeed ambitious, but also attainable. Next is R, which stands for relevant and aligned. So you want to ensure that the goals are relevant with yourself and your life goals. And then T stands for time-bound and transparent. So you want to give yourself a deadline versus just, someday I want to dive to 100 meters. Have a day that you want to do that by, and then transparent, meaning share your goals with others. I mean, you don't have to do it on social media, but just with friends, coaches, and such. And so that covers the SMART part of the SMARTER acronym, which is specifically for goal setting and alignment. The ER part of the SMARTER acronym is just for goal tracking. So E standing for evaluate. Evaluate your progress. This can be done through journaling or reviewing your logbook. It can be helpful if you have a coach to discuss together and to evaluate your challenges and your blocks. And then the last one is R, recognize and reward. So recognize your effort and your milestone wins and reward your achievements and your goal attainment. So how are you going to reward yourself when you achieve your main goal and also your milestone goals? And so by making sure that your goals and your sub-goals are smarter, and by having goals that are realistic, relevant, specific, measurable, etc., this is so important when it comes to keeping motivated in freediving. Once you know your goal and your sub-goals, definitely write them down. A study I read about that was done by Dr. Gail Matthews of the Dominican University of California. 267 participants were recruited from a wide range of professions, lawyers, accountants, nonprofit employees, marketers, etc., and also from a variety of countries. And those who wrote down their goals were 39.5% more likely to accomplish them. That's like pretty much 40%. Then the people who wrote their goals and sent progress reports to friends were 76.7% more likely to achieve their goals. So I'd highly recommend writing down your goals, and if you want, share the progress with your friends, with your family, because it'll certainly help. A tool that I'd highly recommend for all of this, for the goal setting, the sub goals, and the milestone planning, all of that, as well as tracking the goals and journaling, is the self journal. It's really an all-in-one tool for goal planning for, well, anything, not just for sports goals. And no, this isn't like a paid ad or anything. This is actually something that I use and that I really like. The self journal, you can find it at bestself.co. And there they have a free PDF version, which is what I got. I think you just have to subscribe or something. Or you can buy a printed version of the journal, which is around $35. I just can't receive shipments where I am, so that's why I got the PDF. Otherwise, I would have definitely purchased it. So anyway, this is basically a goal planning and tracking workbook. So I have my main goal written down. Usually it's a particular depth goal or training towards a particular competition. And then the workbook guides you into creating 3 sub goals that you will need to do in order to achieve that main goal. Then it walks you through setting your milestones in each of those 3 sub goals. So it's a little hard to explain all the details, but if you check it out on their website, you'll see what I mean. So just by using the self-journal, which is basically a 3-month goal planner / tracker / journal in one, it guides you through the entire process of good goal setting. And I definitely recommend watching their little how-to videos on YouTube, because I know I was stuck at some points, like figuring out the sub-goals and the milestones, but the videos really helped. So now, whenever I start with a new 3-month goal, I just read the first few pages of the self-journal again, and then follow along with their steps in the journal and their steps in the YouTube video, and then done. And off I go. So we're about 25 minutes into the show now, and I want to touch on just a few things just while we're on the topic of goal setting. And then in the next episode, I'll continue the conversation on motivation for freediving, and I'll talk about other motivating factors, basically everything else besides goal setting. So something just to note about goal setting. Of course, it's great to have these big goals, like doing a competition or diving to a particular depth, or even setting your goal to do a national record or world record. This is great, and I've met a lot of freedivers where they have these big goals and they train consistently and with 100% effort, and some achieve their goals and then some don't, just for various reasons. But then other times I meet freedivers who have these big goals, but they're not putting the time and the effort that they need in order to achieve their goals. So there's basically a gap between the goals they have and the effort they're willing to put into their goals. Thing is, it's easy to say that you want to be this successful freediver, but it's more difficult to actually make it happen. So if you find that you have a sort of disconnect where your goals don't match the amount of effort that you're putting in or willing to put in, or you find that your goals, maybe they're set outside of reality as far as time goes, then basically you have 3 choices. You can either lower the goals in order to match your effort, or you can raise your effort to match your goals, or you can adjust your timeline. There's obviously no right answer, only you know what's best for you, or you can speak with a coach to help advise you. But if you're truly motivated to become a super successful freediver, then you better make sure that you're doing the work necessary to achieve your goals. And keep in mind, there's absolutely nothing wrong with lowering your goals a bit, because keep in mind, you can always exceed your goals. Alessia Zucchini said in an interview with Freedive Your Life, and I quote, "I start an event and I didn't think about I want to win world championship. Every time I try to put a goal that I know I can do. It's not too much because it's better to do something and after I'm happy, and then I say, okay, now I can do a little bit more." So Alessia's strategy is to have a goal that she knows she can do and maybe even exceed, but she's not going to set some crazy goal that she's not sure that she can do. Herbert Niche, when he first started, he had no depth goals and was just focused on progressing and exploring his limits. And then, of course, later he set specific goals. And he said, quote, "When I first dived to 32 meters during my trip to Egypt, I realized this was very far from any world record. At that time, Umberto Pellizzari had the record at 80 meters. That is quite a big difference. So in the beginning, I didn't even think about world records. It was more that I was astonished at my own progression." I think this is what keeps most freedivers motivated. They don't focus so much on what their competitors are doing, but more on reaching, progressing, and working towards their own limits. My drive is to explore the unknown, crossing physiological boundaries, and achieving goals that seem beyond my limits. Of course, it becomes even more interesting if you see that you can push yourself far beyond what you initially thought was possible. My drive for going deeper is not about getting another world record, but if by coincidence that limit comes close to a world record, of course that's motivating too. And that brings me to my last topic, which is goal setting for more beginner level or intermediate level freedivers. If you've been freediving for, let's say, less than 8 months or a year, I don't know, somewhere around that. Obviously, it depends on the person and how often you're freediving. If you're kind of more beginner level freediver, for sure, you can certainly set goals. But it might not make a lot of sense this early on in your freediving journey, especially setting depth goals or even competition goals. It might just be a bit overwhelming. Miguel Lozano, in an interview, recommended that rather than focusing on objectives and progression, that many freedivers benefit more just by gaining experience in the water, to understand yourself and your intuition and your sense of the sport. And I quote from his interview here, and this is the main problem, I think, in freediving. There is a rush to get objectives so fast. You lose a little bit of the essence of the sport. I think once your only goal in freediving is numbers, the game is over so fast. You do world records or you black out. So I think the learning process is so important and so beautiful to understand yourself. When you just focus on progression, you lose a little bit of this. For my dives below 110 meters, I never had alarms because I don't like them. I don't count any pulls or kicks or where I do my mouth fill. I did it naturally because for me, alarms make me anxious because I have an expectation. When the alarm doesn't sound when I think it should sound, I get nervous. When I take off the alarm, I know where I have to do my mouth fill because I feel where I am. Now I do use an alarm because I think if you have a methodology for deep dives, you can play safer and know that you are good or not, or if you have to turn or not. I think it's possible to be too technical. You see people with the best equipment, the best neck weight, fluid goggles, everything to go to 30 meters or wherever. It's good that there's more equipment, there's more media and everything, but don't lose the sense of the sport. So that's in an interview he did with freediveearth.com. And I think this makes perfect sense. And I totally agree. If you're just starting out in your freediving journey, I think it's excellent if you can first just get some experience in freediving, enjoying it, having fun, playing, trying out all the different disciplines. And then when you want to try a new experience in freediving and challenge yourself on another level and in new ways, then you can start maybe with some goal setting and depth goals or competition goals and such. So I think this is a good spot to conclude this episode because we're a little over 30 minutes into the show, and I'm trying to keep the episodes within 30 to 40 minutes so that you don't get bored or too overloaded with information. So I'll continue this topic about motivation for freediving in the next episode, where I'll talk about other factors and tips for motivation. For example, I'll talk about loving or at least accepting the grind, how picking a freediving competition can help motivation, how being positive and optimistic can help your freediving, having a coach or just a regular training buddy or group of buddies, anticipating things before they occur, motivational cues, among other things, and then I'll also fill you in about what motivates me. So don't forget to join the group on Facebook at facebook.com/groups/freediving podcast. And feel free to follow me on Instagram if you would like, or on Facebook. You can just search for my name. Now that my Wi-Fi is working again, I'm trying to post regular training updates on my Facebook page and on Instagram. And yeah, that's it for now. So feel free to listen after to find out more about what's going on with me and my training. And dive safe. Please share this widely. Thank you all very much for listening. So my depth training in free immersion is progressing slowly but surely. I've been mixing it up between deep dive trainings, just inching my way deeper and deeper, and then also doing medium depth sessions or even some shallow sessions where I'm working on dive time or FRC dives. A new training I just incorporated, as recommended by Harry Shamas from Freedive Passion. One of the things he suggested that I do to improve my breath hold, my dive time, and my mental was to do a static on the surface and then immediately go on the dive. So I did 2 sessions like this in the week, doing a couple of warm-ups, 2 warm-ups, and then doing 3 50-meter dives right after a static apnea on the surface. So I started, I think, just with a 10-second static apnea, and then worked up to a 30-second static apnea, and then plus the 50-meter dive. So the tricky thing is not to speed up, even though you're super tempted to right after doing a static apnea. The feeling of doing a dive like this is actually very similar to a competition dive. I actually kept having deja vu, feeling like I was on a competition dive. It's the same sort of feelings and stress. So keeping the speed just a normal speed when you're slightly more stressed and you feel like you have less air, it's another really good challenge about the training. So I'm going to keep doing this training and hoping that I can get up to maybe a 1-minute static on the surface, who knows, maybe even 1:30, and then the 50-meter dive. I'm just going to kind of build it sort of slowly. Unfortunately, this week I had 2 LMCs on my deep dive, so I'm still trying to figure that out. I think it was due to eating dinner too late in the evening, or because I had a kind of deepish dive right before each of the deep dives. So it's hard to know for sure, but I'll dive a little bit shallower on the next deep dive day and change my dinner time and not do a deep dive right after another deep dive. So one win this week was that I got up to a 3 30-minute dive time. I think it was around 32 or 33 meters. But that 3:30 time was super feasible and very easy. So I hope to get my dive time in the 4 to 4:30 range in these coming weeks. And that's pretty much it. So take care and hope you have a great weekend.